before we get started, if you are new to the channel, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me today here in Zone 8A. And speaking of zones, one of the biggest mistakes, or probably the biggest mistake that I made when I first started gardening. And if I can keep somebody else from making this one mistake, it'll be worthwhile, okay? Everyone's zone is different. And we have to pick our plants, pick our varieties, and even decide where we're going to plant our garden, mostly according to our zone. I mean, I can't go by somebody in the West. I'm on the East Coast. So what someone is growing on the West Coast may not work for me on the East Coast, and vice versa. We make a lot of mistakes when we first start gardening. Sometimes this particular mistake is made even when we have a history of growing in our families, even when we know what we're doing, although we may just be starting. Everyone that's starting a garden, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are new to gardening. But I made this one mistake, and I wouldn't say it's a regret, but it kept me from growing my garden to, number one, the best of my ability, and number two, to the best of my garden's ability. I didn't start growing. I mean, I've been cooking since I was pretty much a toddler, but I didn't start actually growing my own personal garden until about, 5 years ago. But I grew up with a garden in my backyard. Did I pay attention? Not necessarily, but I paid enough attention. Let's just say that, enough attention. And even though I paid attention, and not only did I grow up with a garden in my backyard, my families, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, everyone had huge gardens growing up. But that still didn't stop me from making this one mistake. And I don't want you all to make that one mistake, okay? When we grow our gardens, we have to first determine what we want to grow, how much we want to grow, and how we want to grow it. Everybody's not growing an organic garden. That's one, okay? And that's not the mistake, but it has a lot, or I should say, can have a lot to do with the mistake. And depending on what you're using in your garden, you might get this fantastic harvest. You might be able to grow abundantly, depending on what you're using in your garden. Well, when I first started gardening, I made this one mistake. And it took me about 2 years before I even realized it was a mistake that I was making. And that was waiting on a harvest. When we look at other people, when some of you all even look at me, and when you look at other gardeners and you see what they're doing, and they have big containers and bushels of tomatoes and crops of this and crops of that and buckets of this and buckets of that, and you say, oh, I want to harvest like that. So you wait. You grow and you wait, and you keep watching your plants and you wait, and you're looking for this harvest. You're like, oh, I would just want to get this big bucket of tomatoes, this big bucket of squash, or whatever it may be that you're growing. that's the mistake. I kept waiting. And sometimes when you're waiting, you don't harvest what God has given you already. You don't harvest what you already have in your garden. And you don't realize that depending on what it is, as you harvest, you'll get more. Well, you see, I'm growing in containers only, and I really do have a very small garden. So just by that one thing alone, growing in containers in a small garden, I am not going to get what someone is growing on acres and acres of land. But I waited because that's what I thought I'd get. I thought that if I planted this tomato plant and it was producing tomatoes, that one day I'd be able to come out here and harvest 100 tomatoes. Instead of, when I had those 2 or 3 tomatoes on there, get my tomatoes, get them, bring them in, harvest what you got. And that's the mistake I don't want you all to make. Whatever you have growing on in your garden, as it grows, harvest it. Harvest it. Don't wait until you have 100 cucumbers to harvest. If you've got 1 cucumber out there and it is ready, get it. Get it. That's your harvest for the day. Don't wait to harvest all of this fruit, all of these vegetables, because one thing, when you do wait and you do have all this, you see there's an up and a downside to everything. And yes, I could grow in my ground and probably harvest 100, 200 tomatoes at once. But now what am I going to do with 100 or 200 tomatoes? I have got to preserve them, and you only have a length of time to preserve anything before it goes bad. Okay? So now I've got all this work to do because now I got to bring this in, and if it's more than 1 crop. Now there are some people that have homesteads and this is what their purpose is and this is what they're doing. And that's fantastic. But if that's not your goal, to stand in the kitchen and then try to can all this stuff and preserve all this stuff or freeze dry this stuff or dehydrate this stuff, you can spend a lot of hours doing that. But if you harvest that cucumber and you have salad for today or salad for tomorrow, and then you come back out and there's another one and you get that, or you get 5 or 6 tomatoes and you make a couple of jars of tomato sauce because you got these big boy tomatoes. Or you've got cherry tomatoes and you've got maybe 2 bowls of cherry tomatoes and you can use them for a salad or you can snack on them or whatever it may be. My blueberry bushes, when I get ready to harvest and I harvest them, I may have enough to freeze and enough for a pie and enough to snack on, and that's good. I don't need to wait until I have a bushel of blueberries because then I need to preserve some. I can't eat that, and neither can you. So don't make the mistake that I made, okay? Harvest as it grows. Be proud of the harvest that you have. Be thankful for the harvest that you have, because not always when we grow do we get to harvest, because sometimes it doesn't grow, even here in my containers. No matter how hard we try, even when we do everything right, sometimes it just doesn't work. And there's a season for everything we plant. And sometimes last year you could have had a beautiful harvest and a beautiful season for squash or cucumbers or zucchini or whatever you planted. And this year you can barely get one. Be thankful for the one and harvest it. So don't make the mistake that I made. Harvest what you can, when you can. And if you are new to the channel, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me today here in my garden. I really do appreciate each and every one of you all. Take a second and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you won't miss anything. And I'm going to leave a couple of links at the end of this video and down in the pinned comments for my cooking channel and my new channel, Pam's POV, where I'm going to be sharing all kind of new tips, tricks, and hacks. It's a new channel. So if you're not over there, follow me over there too. Thank you so much to my returning subscribers and my channel members as well. I'm Pam, this is Zone 8A, and anywhere you can sit a pot, you can grow a plant.